Good morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our session on Ayushman 2020. And I am your host today, Abhinav Agarwal, and I am the curator of Indic Book Club. And let me tell you a couple of things about Indic Book Club before I introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Niman Sridhar. So, Indic Book Club is an initiative incubated by Indic Academy, and it seeks to foster, nurture, and create writers and researchers and intellectuals in the sphere, and it does so by providing opportunities, grants, and publishing opportunities and training avenues to people who are interested in writing about Indic themes. And this is done through, and we have been in existence since 2015. So we have been around for more than 5 years now. And our over the course of the last 5 years, we have incubated and promoted over 100 authors. We have published through different publishing houses about a dozen books, the most recent of which has been published by Bloomsbury, India, and it's called Unsung Valor. Tales of relatively unknown tales of valor from the Mahabharata, and it's been curated by another Indic author, Ms. Sai Surupa, who's in her own right a very known and best-selling author. And during this time, we have as I said, promoted more than 100 authors. We have, through giveaways, contests, author promotions, and reviews, we have given away close to 10,000 books in the last 5 years, which I think is unparalleled in any such a similar book club initiative across the world. So you can follow us on, you can be a part of Indic Book Club either by going and registering on our website, indicbookclub.com, or following us on Twitter at the handle Indic Book Club, all one word. Or better still, I would, excuse me, I would encourage all of you to register and join the discussion, the very active community of several thousand people already on our Facebook group. So it is facebook.com/groups/Indic Book Club. And you can join the discussion there. And we have several initiatives and contests and initiatives that keep coming from time to time. And you can join a vibrant community of people who are as passionate about reading and Indic knowledge as all of you are. So with that very brief introduction, I will introduce Dr. Niman Sridhar. And first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Niman, for joining us and being a part of Ayushman 2020. So Dr. Niman Sridhar is the son of the late Dr. Sridharan PD, a renowned allopathic physician from Vaipan, Kerala. Dr. Niman has always had an affinity towards the great wisdom of ancient Indian sciences from a very young age. So when initiated into Ayurveda by the late Professor C.R. Agnivesh, it felt like a homecoming for him. So Dr. Niman belongs to the first batch of the Nangalil Ayurveda Medical College, where he was also the college union chairman for the year 2003-04. Being an avid reader and writer, he has a lot in common with all of us. But Dr. Niman also realized that there were not enough players to propagate genuine Ayurveda using the print and digital media, despite having a huge public demand on the one hand, and expert physicians and prestigious institutions on the other. So he decided to shape his career to bridge this gap and thereby help the real stakeholders in keeping up with the rising global awareness and utility of Ayurveda. So Dr. Niman, we are delighted to have you here with us, and I personally, and I'm sure all of us are really looking forward to hearing you talk and share your experiences, your knowledge, and what so I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Abhinavji. So, without further ado, let's start, right? Gurave sarvalokanam vishaje bhavaropinam nidhaye sarva vidyanam dakshinamurtaye namah. Pranams to all. Ages ago, there occurred a meeting in a place called Chaitraratha forest in the Himalayan valley. They had a problem in their mind that people around them are suffering from a lot of diseases, and they wanted answers for its solution, and they wanted to learn Ayurveda. So thousands of years after that, when we are actually having this conclave, this series of sessions, I think it is nothing short of that meeting uh, taken part by rishis with a confluence of intelligence with this altruistic intention in mind. But interestingly, the problem remains the same. You know, we are still thinking about this problem. Like people around us are suffering from a lot of diseases, and we are looking for answers in Ayurveda. The task assigned to me is to give an overview of Ayurveda literature. And quite frankly, I feel like that old Amul chocolate advertisement. You know, it goes like this. I think a guy is sitting in his office with tie and everything, and he sings like, "I'm too old for fast cars, but I'm too young to be the boss." And then the boss would step in and say that, "But I think you're just right for ramen chocolate." I don't know if you have seen this ad. I grew up seeing all these ads, so I cannot help bringing it up. The thing is, with such an elite panel, with such a learned community watching this, I feel that I'm too old to talk about Ayurveda literature, which I learned in my college days. But at the same time, I feel that I'm too young to be an authoritative speaker on this subject. So I thought, yeah, anyway, I'll try my level best and uh, try and bring some light into what I feel a very, very relevant area of Ayurveda literature, and then talk about these relevant areas are not much discussed nowadays. So I thought I'd focus on that side, and if time permits, I would add on more and more items to this time frame, right? So to begin with, I should say that words are failing me to thank Indic Academy and the people behind this. I'm not naming anybody, but all of them, the work is astounding, and I'm very much thrilled to be a part of this. So when we speak about Ayurveda literature, we are actually talking about the history of the evolution of human intelligence itself. So you can see that gradation in Ayurveda literature as well. And yeah, history, if I have to quote Jacob Burckhardt, a Swedish historian, he says that history is nothing but what one generation finds worthy of note in another. So all this Ayurveda literature, the classical Ayurveda literature, is nothing but documented evidences that our forefathers, people before us, found very relevant, very worthy of noting down, so that it stays, it is carried forward to the next generation. And in that way, uh, this Ayurveda literature is purely a historical approach. And when we have to talk about the history of Ayurveda literature, I think we should start with history of writing itself, right? It makes sense, right? So we now know that there were at least 4 different civilizations, coming up with their own script. Sumer, for example, in Mesopotamia, their script, the cuneiform, is believed to be somewhere around 3000, 3400 years old, BCE. That is a key point. And then comes Egyptian scripts. China is believed to have developed their own. There are also Latin American civilizations that had their own script. But we should also look at the Indus script. It is becoming a lot of, it is gaining a lot of popularity these days, and more scholars are attaching a timeline of somewhere around 5500 BCE to the Indus script. Now, we actually don't know whether the Indus script, the Harappa Mohenjo-daro script, is a fully formed language. We are not sure whether it's a totem series of totem symbols. We don't know if it's an iconography, but scholars like Richard Salomon uh, is almost sure that the Brahmi script is heavily indebted from the Indus script, and you also have a lot of linguists like Airavadam Mahadevan and Asko Parpola connecting this Indus script with Dravidian languages, Tamil to be very specific. When you interpret Indus script with Tamil, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of scholars are aligning to that side. So when I'm actually trying to form a timestamp over here, a timeline where I could place a series of authors. That is how I would like to take this session about. Like instead of giving you a list of books, I thought I would talk about authors, their nature of writing, and some of the works that have survived in a direct or indirect form. So I think in one of our previous sessions, MP Nateshan sir was stating that Ayurveda is a prokta knowledge. Prokta, so that means even before we started writing things down, we had a very, very long legacy of transferring this knowledge in a oral tradition, the Vamuri as it is called in Malayalam. So it is proven by the fact that even though these literatures are created in a geographically wide apart points, the fundamentals remain the same. They have the same pattern of arranging the chapters. The chapter numbers are almost similar in most of the Samhitas, and the content is also very much alike. So, thanks to the oral tradition of the Lautika, modern day Sanskrit, we have this seamless transition of knowledge. And before I enter into the core literature, the books as such, I need to thank, I feel like thanking an Afghan murderer, a killer from Afghanistan called Dad Mahmood. Uh, you know why? Because this happens back in 1890 that this guy, this Dad Mahmood, kills a Scottish officer in Kashmir. And at that time, a person called Hamilton Bower was in charge, and he was set in pursuit to catch this Dad Mahmood. And Dad Mahmood ran like anything. It's pretty astounding that he went from Kashmir to all the way to the Sino-Russian border in northeastern China. And interestingly, these guys followed him all the way through. And while Hamilton Bower was camping in that region, a local hawker came into his camp, a person selling antiques and stuff like that. And among his stuffs, he found a curious manuscript. This Bower, he was not a man of language; he was a military guy. But he, by God's grace, he found this manuscript very interesting, and he thought of sending it across to his friends in the Asiatic Society. This is happening in 1890, and the guys at Asiatic Society were not able to decipher it, so they released a publication saying that yeah, this is an indecipherable document. And at that time, Hornley, a very famous linguist at that time, uh, he found it interesting. He took this up, and with the help of a German linguist, they identified that this is written in Gupta Brahmi. Now, Gupta Brahmi was very much in vogue in the 5th century CE. And by 1907, they were able to decipher this manuscript. And it is now known as Bower manuscript. And its content is mostly Navanitaka. Interestingly, it was written by 4 different scribes. It has context from Charaka Samhita, Sutta Samhita, its own original contributions. And there are, of course, other sciences that are being addressed in that. But this 56 pages of Purcha Patra manuscript, it created a huge ripple because Hornell said that this was the oldest written Indian text available yet. And thanks to that phrase, a huge rat race started, and all the linguists around the world, they started going into all the museums, all the palaces, traditional homes, everywhere, even markets. wherever they could find Indian manuscripts and try and decipher and be known. And this resurfaced a lot of books that were, long forgotten, not in use, and some were even, very much dilapidated. But however, we would have eventually gotten all these books, but this incident, pushed us. It fast forward the entire process, and uh, because of this, we have all the books that we have right now. So this was the incident that we have to thank, so that we can talk about this Ayurveda literature. Another thing that we should keep in perspective is that writing a book or a tantra or a samhita, whatever at those days, unlike now, was a result of establishment. Because only if you are established that you can write a book. Atraya, after teaching Agnivesh and all, only when Atraya is convinced that these guys are good enough, said, okay, now write a book and let me see, and I would evaluate. So you can also see the context of Jivaka, because when Jivaka postulated his findings, it was not originally accepted by the scientific community. They said, like, you're not old enough or you're not wise enough. So he had to become Vriddha Jivaka, apparently by dipping in a river. But he had to spend some time, rework, and then become Vriddha Jivaka and get accepted in the scientific community. So the process was very, very hard. It was not every man's job to write a book. And also, you can see a lot of context where these authors vouch on truth, that they by no chance have written anything that is not observed, validated, or seen in practice. So only if they are fully convinced about something, they would write it down. Because writing itself was a very new, and it was such an innovation, and it was treated with utmost respect. It happens even now also, when a new software, a language comes out, the people who actually know it are like $1 million people in the world. So it happens like that, and they have a responsibility to it. So keep these things in mind, because we'll be talking about a comparative literature in the end. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into the literature. So we know that the scripts and the way of writing is the beginning of our timeline. It is somewhere around 1800 BC. So when I say that, yeah, we have a very old book in Ayurveda, it can be comfortably placed at least at 1800 BCE. So around 2000 years before Christ. So that is our starting point. So when we start on time, we should talk about Brahma first, the redactor of Ayurveda. Now, let's not go into the mythology side. I would like to focus on a book called Brahma Samhita. Yes, Brahma, the person who has compiled the knowledge of Ayurveda, has written a book called Brahma Samhita. And it is said that it had over 1 lakh verses arranged in 1000 chapters. It might be an exaggeration, but we actually don't know, because we don't have any direct references of the Brahma Samhita. Neither, I don't know if there is any quotations that are available from Brahma Samhita, but we do have a lot of formulations that are believed to be invented by Brahma. Our very beloved Chandraprabha Gudiya, Mrityunjaya Agata, and all are attributed to Brahma Samhita. And unlike in Ayurvedic literature, we have a lot of literature talking about the transfer of Ayurvedic knowledge. So in Ayurveda books, it is said that Brahma taught Daksha Prajapati, but in books like Brahma Vaivarta Purana and all, it is actually Bhaskara who is learning from Brahma. And we will talk about Bhaskara in a bit. The thing is, you can see this transfer of medical knowledge in a lot of civilizations, not just in Indian books, but also in Egyptian literature and Greek literature. You can see, for example, for Egyptians, there is a person called Thoth, who can be equated with Brahma for the transfer of medical knowledge. Now Daksha becomes Osiris, and the list goes on like that. The reason why I said this is because to bring a perspective that this could be a global event, that all civilizations witnessed, or this was the way in which knowledge was transferred. And so just to bring a perspective, now coming back to the next person in the timeline, these are all in the same time frame that I'm talking about. We have Shiva himself, yes, our beloved Vaidyanatha. He is the Upasana Murti for a lot of Vaidyas, and he has plenty of books in his name, plenty of books. And um, it is said that there is an Ayur Grantha, which was said to be the original written knowledge of medical sciences. And I think it was said that it was written in the Treta Yuga by Shiva himself. And if you look at Rasa Shastra books, there are innumerable books, either directly said to be written by Shiva or attributed to Shiva, like the Rudra Yamala Tantra. It is said that it is written by Shiva himself. And if you look at Chakradatta and all, by Chakrapani Datta, you can have numerous quotations from a book called Saiva Siddhanta. Saiva Siddhanta, according to Chakrapani Datta, is a original real work of Lord Shiva. And formulations like Shiva Gudiga and all are from the Saiva Siddhanta as per Chakrapani Datta. Now, another point to note is that for Ayurveda literature, at least, when we say that Shiva, Brahma, or Dhanvantari, we may not be addressing the author directly, because unlike nowadays, attributing a work to the self was secondary, I feel, because a lot of attributions may be out of respect, or these names would be like Gotra names. So we may not be able to identify the exact person who has written in some context. So we needn't directly go into the notion that this was the Lord Shiva himself or somebody of his Gotra. I'm not going into those intricate elements, but for the time being and for the want of time, let's stick to this. Right. So so after Brahma, yes, there is Bhaskara. Let's keep him aside. Daksha, I'm not aware of any books written by Daksha, but he was a critical element of transfer of knowledge, of Ayurveda knowledge. Bhaskara, on the other hand, is said to have written a book called Bhaskara Samhita. It is mentioned in Brahma Vaivarta Purana and also another book called Jnana Bhaskara, where this is a dialogue between Surya and his charioteer, Aruna, I guess. So they are talking about all the diseases and all, and it's mostly mantra and tantra. Not the diagnosis part is good, but the treatment part is mostly Adrevya Chikitsa. And Bhaskara is the father of Ashwini Kumara. So I think it makes more sense from Brahma Vaivarta Purana that even at that time maybe the nepotism was there. So Bhaskara might have taught Ashwini Kumaras directly. But Ayurveda literature says that Daksha then teaches the Ashwini Kumara. They have their individual names. This Ashwini twins, Nashatya and Dasra, something like that. So Ashwini Kumaras, you find profuse attributions, not just in Ayurvedic literature, but throughout Indian mythology, like the miraculous healing that they were doing, and they could be just very intelligent horsemen or something. But the way it might appear as science fiction, but now we know that most of the surgical procedures that they did was actually doable. Kirada Murthy sir was talking about the replacement of leg of Queen Visfala with iron leg. So yeah, they were good at prosthetics. And then Ashwini Kumaras rejuvenated people like Chavana, Vandana and all. And also regaining eyesight for a lot of sages like Parabhaja, and reviving, like bringing back people from the dead was also one of their forte. Then in Charaka Samhita and all, there is mentioning about Ghosha, curing leprosy of Ghosha, and then even reattaching severed heads. Yajna's head was reattached by Ashwini Kumara, and at those times, when I first heard about all these things, like I was like, this is never going to happen. And a couple of days back, I read about scientists, succeeding in reattaching heads of rats in Sweden. I'm not sure from where. I don't remember from where, but people are actually doing it now. So plausible, certainly yes. But did Ashwini Kumaras did it or not? Not the topic of our discussion. Anyway, a lot of books are attributed to Ashwini Kumaras, like Chikitsa Sara Sangraha, according to Brahma Vaivarta Purana. Then the Ashwini Samhita itself, quoted in Bhava Prakasha. Then Nadi Nidana. It's a recent work to be compared. I'm not sure whether it's originally by Ashwini Kumara, but this is attributed to Ashwini Kumara. Now, coming to the next person, Ashwini Kumara then taught Indra. Indra is the junction point. It is Indra, like the Prometheus, who gave us Ayurveda. But Indra didn't give it by himself. Indra taught humans. Until this point, we can call the people before Indra or up to Indra as people from heaven, celestial being, or Devaloka, things like that. But it is from the point of Indra that we get, as humans, we get Ayurveda. So, who did Indra teach is still contested, because in Charaka Samhita, they say that they formed a committee of rishis in the Himalayan meeting. And Bharadwaja was assigned the leader or the representative, and Bharadwaja went to Indra and learned Ayurveda and came back and taught everybody. But Vakpada is more encompassing. They said that he says that all the rishis together, Bharadwaja along with Atreya, Kashyapa, Nimi, and even Dhanvantari, they all went together and learned, which I find more interesting. And then there is Susruta Samhita, who says that it is my guru. Dhanvantari went first to Indra and learned. So let that be. And so let's now that we are still in the Devaloka, I would like to also talk about a few guys there. One is Yama himself, the Lord of Death. He is said to have written a book called Jnana Arnava. All these books are medical books. I'm not talking about other literature. Yeah, a lot of books are attributed to these authors, but I'm mostly talking about medical literature. So, a book called Jnana Arnava, which is mentioned in Brahma Vaivarta Purana. I'm not sure if we have any manuscript of that, but Narada is also said to have written a book called Dhatu Lakshana. Now, this is really fascinating for me, because in all Puranas and all, you can see that Narada is a person who knew people, what would they think or what would trigger them. So he seems like a guy who knows Prakriti Pariksha, Nadi Pariksha and all. And this book is all about doshas, sadhus, Prakriti and Nadi Pariksha. And you can also see formulations like Lakshmi Vilasa Rasa and all, attributed to Narada. So his legacy is still alive. And this came as a surprise to me when I learned it a few years back. Like Narada writing a book was new to me. Now, talking about Bharadwaja, Bharadwaja is said to have written a book called Bharadwajiyam. You get a manuscript of one chapter of it on Prameha, but that's it. You don't have more info on that. Then there is also another book called Bheshaja Kalpa, and there is a commentary still available, which is written by Venkatesa. A commentary on Bheshaja Kalpa is available. And Bharadwaja is a contemporary of Vishwamitra. Yes, our very own firebrand sage. In Ramayana and all, Balakanta is entirely Vishwamitra alone. And interestingly, there are plenty of Ayurveda books who sees Vishwamitra as a medicine man, like Nibandha Sangraha and even Tattva Chandrika and Bhava Prakash and all. They identify Vishwamitra as a medicine man. And at this point, I think we should start getting comfortable with the fact that these rishis that we are talking about, they were not experts in one single forte. They were like polymaths. They knew about a lot of things from a lot of different branches. And most of the thanks goes to the structure of Indian philosophy and sciences. They are not compartmentalized. They are not silos. The foundations are the same for all this literature, and so you can build upon any parallel branch, and the communications between these branches are very seamless. So it's easy to become a polymath with Indian philosophy. Vishwamitra is like the father of Susruta. So Susruta, it's actually mentioned from Mahabharata onwards. Like Susruta is one of the sons of Vishwamitra, and it is widely mentioned in Susruta Samhita. So Vishwamitra becomes another colleague of our Bharadwaja. And the rival of Vishwamitra, Vasishta, is also said to have written a book called Vasishta Samhita. I think it's mentioned in Yoga Tarangini. Quotation from Vasishta Samhita is available. One more person called Markandeya. Markandeya, you all know the legend of Markandeya, right? His lifespan was set at 12 years. So after 12 years, Markandeya would die. So this made him very worried. So he started doing a lot of penances. And it is said that he lived so long enough that he was able to decipher almost all the sciences. And yeah, the legend goes like that. In Ayurveda literature, you can find that, in Charaka Samhita, he said that Markandeya is a direct disciple of Bharadwaja. And he took something called Amrita oil, Amrita Taila, to prolong his life. Amrita Taila was also taken by Chavana Maharshi. And this Amrita Taila direct reference is found in Navnidhara, the Bower manuscript. And yeah, now let's come to Bharadwaja. We talked about Vishwamitra, Vasishta. Now comes Atreya. Punarvasu Atreya. I'm not going into the exact identification. I'm just calling Punarvasu Atreya, the son of Atri and Chandrabhagi. And you can assume the time period of Atreya somewhere around 1000 BCE. From Agni-Vesha's time period. And it is mentioned of an Atreya Samhita, which we don't find direct quotations in Charaka Samhita and all, but this Atreya Samhita is believed to have somewhere around 45,000 slokas in 5 chapters. And Shotla in Gadanigraha has a lot of quotations from directly from Atreya Samhita. And very popular formulations like Mahamayura Krita and all are from Atreya's contribution. There is another sage called Nimi. Nimi is called Videhadipati. Some scholars identify him as Janaka himself because Videha is Mithila. And he is an epitome of Chalakya Tantra, and it can even be said Nimi Tantra. And blinking, the time duration for a blink is called Nimesha as a tribute to Nimi. And you can see that 3 Nimesha is somewhere around 1 Kashta, 4.6 seconds and all. So all these they have quantified. It is said that Nimi has written one of the major books is called Vaidya Sandeha Panchini, and I think Srikanta Datta and all have referred from Vaidya Sandeha Panchini of Nimi. Kashyapa is also is considered as the guru of Vriddha Jivaka, and we would, if we have time, we can talk more and more about Kashyapa and all. Kashyapa is predominant on pediatric, like Vriddha Jivaka Tantra. His disciple has written this Kashyapa Samhita, and very good book on pediatric conditions. But the thing is, the book is not complete. At least the version that we have, a lot of pages are missing, and this is a common case with a lot of manuscripts because they were not preserved properly. Time kills all this literature. Now, we cannot conclude this part without addressing Ravana. Yes, Ravana, Lankadipati. And interestingly, one of his major works is in pediatry. Can you even believe it? Like the Ravana in our minds and the Ravana in Ayurveda literature is poles apart. And Kumara Tantra is the book. It's also called Bala Tantra and all. It's a book on pediatry directly. And he also is said to have written a book called Nadi Pariksha, and also a very famous work called Arka Prakasha. Now, the thing is, most of the books are timed by evaluating the literature and the mentioning of certain events or certain places, certain people, certain medicines. This helps us to date a work. So when you evaluate Arka Prakasha, you see that there is mentioning of opium, there is mentioning of syphilis, piranga, and there is even the word Arka is coming from the Persian word Arak. So all this makes the scholars reluctant to date it before 16th century, because we didn't have knowledge of these things before 16th century. So this could be another work, just like an attribution to Ravana. We are not sure whether it is written by Ravana himself. Now let's come to Agni-Vesha. Agni-Vesha is the direct disciple of Atreya. he had a lot of colleagues, and the major one of them is like Aknivesha, Bela, Jadugarna, Parasara, Arida, and Sharapani. They all have written tantras, and some of them are available. 3 of them are available, and Aknivesha's was the best work according to Atreya. So this became the magnum opus out of that academy, and this was later worked on by Charaka in somewhere around 2nd century CE, and further in 4th century, Dridabala worked on it further. He added more chapters. We will be talking about Charaka Samhita in detail. So this is Aknivesha. There are also other works called Anjanidana and Nadi Pariksha, which most scholars think is not the real work of Aknivesha, but still it is attributed to Aknivesha. And Phela Samhita is also a very interesting work because it is more concise than Charaka Samhita. And it is believed that Phela Samhita is not further worked upon. No other people have worked on Phela Samhita. So that makes it an original work. It too has 120 chapters, but a lot of the sections are missing. One area that Phela Samhita really marvels is on the areas of mind, psychiatry, mind diseases, mind conditions, functioning of the senses, and all these things. I think Phela is really, really excellent. And even Ashtanga Hridaya, has a quotation like Phela Adhyaha Kim na Pathyandi. Like you are spending time to learn Charaka and all, but you should also be looking at Phela Samhita. They are all very good works. So Vakpada is actually recommending Phela Samhita. So that is there. And another colleague of Aknivesha, Harita Samhita, there is a full book now. But the thing is, it appears that this Harita Samhita is a recent work by some anonymous author who tried to pass it off as the original Harita Samhita. And we are able to understand that this is not the real work because of the works like Vyakhyana Kusumavali and Vyakhya Madhava and Tattva Chandrika and Bhava Prakasha, where in all these books, later books, I think they had the access to the original Harita Samhita, and the quotations found in these books are not found in the newer version of Harita Samhita. That's why we understood that these two are entirely different works of literature. And there are other colleagues of Aknivesha, Jadukarna. We don't have any books available, but Delhana and all have quoted from Jadukarna. There are like, I think it is Mahatikta Krita is said to be invented by Jadukarna. And then comes Parasara. Parasara is like, I think there are 2, Vritta Parasara. Interestingly, in Kashyapa Samhita, Parasara is considered as one of the original authors of medical literature. One of the 8 original authors. So that list is a bit hatke. You don't find that list in the common Ayurveda literature. It's like Kashyapa himself. Then you have Kaushika Vyasa, Vasishta, Bharadwaja, and Markandeya. These guys, and I think Kumbhasambha, I don't remember the names exactly, but please forgive me if I have gone wrong anywhere. But these 8 people are identified as the original authors of medical literature according to Kashyapa Samhita. And okay, so these are the main people of Aknivesha's academy, and we need to skip a bit in the timeline. We started at 1800. We placed Atreya and all at 1000 BCE, Aknivesha and all at 1000 BCE. We need to skip all the way to somewhere around 2nd century CE to talk about Charaka. And Charaka, we are not very sure of his identity because there could be, a Gotra name, or there would be a lot of people, like people who travel around the place to propagate a knowledge, maybe Atharva system. Because Charaka and Atharva Veda are very, similar. Even the bone structures and all are narrated just similarly. And so, for example, in Bhava Prakasha, you can see that Charaka is said as the avatar, an incarnation of Adishesha to work upon Aknivesha's work. And then you have Jayanta Bhatta's Nyaya Manjari, where Charaka is identified as a wise man knowing the properties of a lot of things, which is very much like the nature of Charaka. And in Chinese translation of a Buddhist work called Tripitaka, there is this mentioning of Tehi Lokia, which is translated as Charaka. And it is believed that it is addressing the royal physician of Kanishka, the Kushana king from Bactria. They ruled from Peshawar. And this Charaka is placed at 2nd century CE. So a lot of recent scholars have timelined Charaka as 2nd century CE, but it may not be exactly correct. Now, Charaka Samhita, in the ending colophons and all, they say that there are 12,000 verses in Charaka Samhita. When you actually count it, around 2,000 slokas are missing. So we are not sure whether that work is complete. The work that we have now may not be complete. And Chakrapani Datta has divided all the sutras, all the verses into Guru Sutra, Shishya Sutra, Pradisamskarta Sutra, and Ekiya Sutra. So around 30 chapters, 33 chapters are dialogues between Atreya and Agnivesh. It's fun to read, Agnivesh asking a question. So it's more like looking at a transcribe of a class, and you feel like you are actually in that classroom. So it's fascinating. And also there is a reference in the Siddhisthana, maybe probably by Dridabala, after looking at Charaka Samhita. He says, Yadi hasti the anyatra, yenne hasti na tat sujit. Like whatever is found in Charaka Samhita, it is found everywhere. So whatever is there around the world is mentioned in Charaka Samhita. And if it is not mentioned in Charaka Samhita, yenne hasti na tat sujit. It cannot be found anywhere else. So it is a very interesting reference which shows the magnanimity, the comprehensiveness of Charaka Samhita. And it's a very popular book also. Like Charaka has somewhere around 43 commentaries. I think Charaka Nyasa is the oldest one, at 6th century BC, written by Harishchandra. And there are a lot of them, like Gayadasa, Charaka Chandrika is there. Then Jajara has worked on Nirandara Pada Vyakya. So a lot of works, and Chakrapani's work is called Ayurveda Deepika. Chakrapani is somewhere at somewhere at I'm reaching my time limit. Anyway, so set 11th century. Now I am not in a position, unfortunately, for the want of time, I may not be able to go into a lot of areas which need attention, like Nikhantus or books on Rasa Shastra and modern day work. Because when you are talking about Ayurveda literature, I'll try and finish in 5 minutes time. Please pardon me. When you're looking at Ayurveda literature, it is not complete without talking about modern day literature. There's a lot of great authors like Priyavrata Sharma and my own guru, Professor C.R. Agnivesh. The work that they've done is astounding, and also a lot of journals and magazines. Unfortunately, even though this science is having a big legacy of magazines, they are not consistent. It doesn't call for the real pride of our Ayurveda magazine. They have to get a lot of work done. But I think I should just skip all the description of the authors and all. My real intention is that instead of saying that there is Brihatrai, Charaka Sutra and Vakpada, there is Lekutrai like Madhava, Nidana, Charanga Samhita and Bhava Prakasha. I want my dear audience to get bombarded by this because we are not looking at a few handful of books. We are looking at a big ocean of literature that is available. All these things that I mentioned, you have either direct or indirect references. You can look at manuscript catalogs and see that these books are there. It's still available. So not as published works, but as manuscripts at least. So when the demand to read those things increases, I'm sure there are publishers in this panel, so they would start publishing it. And they are also doing a great job in bringing out a lot of such manuscripts into formal publication. So I hope this brief session, I've run out of time. So I hope whatever I said has made at least a tiny ripple in at least some of you. If that has happened, I'm most obliged and most happy. If you need to know more about this, I'm available by email and all. So I have to thank you all for this. Thank you, Indic Academy. Thank you, everyone, to help me to talk more on this.
So, Dr. Naman, thank you so much for taking the time. We have a couple of questions. So, if we can
Yes.
just take maybe a minute or so to take those
Sure.
questions. One of them
Yeah, sure.
is from Venkat Ananta. He says, "Sir, is Ayurveda therapy also effective for sports performance?"
Okay. We have to think of sports as a physical activity. So they do not talk about sports per se, but we can have a lot of references interpreted as activities and all the injuries. You know, if you look at marma aspects, abhighata. So abhighata is exactly what is happening in sports. You get a trauma, you get a condition, and you're managing it. And there are innumerable references in all the classical literature about abhighata, aganduja vyatis, and all these things. So yes, of course. And what is happening recently is that we are getting more and more professionals who are trained in Ayurveda in the classical way and who are also learning in extra, like sports therapy and trauma care and additional courses. And they are improving their skills on sports medicine. So there is a very growing popular segment of Ayurveda called sports Ayurveda. Of course, there is a very good solution through Ayurveda for sports conditions.
Thank you. The next question is, please tell the reference of Amrut Taila.
This Amrita Taila is mentioned in Navanitaka, the Bower manuscript. And this is available as PDFs. If you go to archive.org or a lot of free archives, you could get Bower manuscript. And in that, Amrita Taila is mentioned. Now, I am not aware of another book where this is mentioned. Perhaps like we feel that Bower manuscript itself is a compilation work, you know, collection of information from different textbooks. So another point is there are different oils in the name of Amrita Taila. But the specific reference for Amrita Taila, I may be able to send it across.
Okay.
I got it from a book of History of Indian Medicine by G.N. Mukherjee. It is that Taila's prescriptions also given.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is, Bharadwaj's works in Ayurveda. Could you please explain more?
Now, Bharadwaja was very pivotal because more than his literary works, a guru is best known by his students, right? So one of the students, according to Susruta Samhita, is Dhanvantari himself. In fact, from Brihat Dharma Purana and Brahma Vaivarta Purana and all, there is this story, the life story of Dhanvantari himself. Dhanvantari was a direct disciple of Bharadwaja. And while completing his course, he married the three daughters of Achini Kumara. And slowly, Dhanvantari started losing interest in the material life. And what Bharadwaja did, along with sages like Galava, is that they made him focus more on earthly life by making him king of Kashi. So this was a key point in history where actually we got a Rajarshi, to settle near Kashi and become a ruler at the same time teach. Dhanvantari was fully focused on the books, and that's how we got the Dhanvantari system of medicine. So we call Susruta as the father of surgery, but in fact, we at least Ayurveda people know that Susruta actually went to Dhanvantari asking him to teach surgery. So Susruta cannot be the father of surgery. It was Dhanvantari, and that would have happened only if Bharadwaja had intervened. Bharadwajiyam and Bheshaja Kalpam are the major books of Bharadwaja. Like I said before, Bharadwajiyam only the chapter on Prameha is available as a manuscript. Bheshaja Kalpa, you don't have the direct book, but you have the commentary on it by Venkatesh. Venkatesh is from the Atreya system.
Excellent.
I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Naman. And it was a pleasure listening to you and everything that you shared.